Well, I'm trying a walk and talk today because this stuff is just too exciting to miss sharing with you. And I'm on the way to the subway, and let's try this. This is Memory Tips 4. And first, I want to review some of the things that we've looked at already. In the first video, we talked about how to never lose your keys or your phone again. The second one, we talked about remembering names and faces. And then the third, we talked about linking a list of items together. And basically, all three of those techniques involve the first of our power tools, which is linking together. And something that I want to review with you is that there's ways that we want to make those links strong in our memory. And all of that is designed around creating original awareness. Original awareness is really what gets that information into your head in the first place. And here's an easy acronym that'll help you remember the ways to make your images stick. And so we're going to talk about impossible P's, P-E-A-S. First of all, you want whatever it is, the image should be impossible. The fact is, if it's impossible, it means your brain has to do the work to construct the image. If it's possible, if it's something that your brain already remembers, there's a chance your brain is going to say, I don't need to come up with that image because I know one already. So impossible. And then P-E-A-S refers to proportion. Make it out of proportion. Exaggeration. Exaggerate one part of the image. A is for action. If there's any way that you can make it active or violent. And S is for substitution. So substitution means if in the example that I did with the link, that there's I'm sleeping on a bottle instead of a bed. That immediately makes it absurd because I've substituted something that doesn't belong in that place. And this is also really its own power tool in a different way, and that's what we're going to cover today. Substitution as a way of handling abstract concepts, abstract words. And all of this really is designed around the fact that your brain doesn't need that much help. And so to remember something, you don't have to come up with exact substitutes. You can even approximate. And I'll get into a little bit of what that involves in the video today. And so you may have, if you're paying attention, realized that we took a few shortcuts in the first few videos, and particularly with names and faces, I said an easy name to remember, and that's Bill. Duck Bill is something that's easy to picture, but not every name is easy to picture. And so, say for instance, with what's a good name that's not easy to picture? Betty. I can't think of any device or object that Betty represents. But what could I think of? Somebody betting on a horse race. And so that's a way of substituting something that's not the exact word, but it's close enough to represent Betty. If you think of somebody betting, immediately it's going to remind you, oh, of course, that was for Betty. And you might also have been paying attention when I said with links of items that they had to be concrete and easy to picture for our first example. Well, today we're going to talk about how to link together a list of items that is not concrete, or at least not easy to remember. And what is a great list to do so with? Something that you probably won't encounter in regular adult life, but as a student, particularly in college, you might have to access Mo's in mineralogy, Friedrich Moe came up with a hardening or a scale of the hardness of minerals, and so we're going to memorize the 10 in that scale, starting with talc and ending with diamonds. And just like the last time, I actually only read this list once, and I committed it to memory myself, and I'm going to teach you how to remember those things right now. So we're going to start with talc, and we're going to link talc to gypsum. So just like I mentioned, the way to do this is you want to try to think of something that's close, that sounds like that, and is close enough to make you remember that. So for me, I think of a gypsy. That's easy to picture. And so I might imagine a gypsy who is spraying talcum powder everywhere. Again, talcum, close enough to make me think of that. So really take a moment to picture a gypsy just getting talcum powder everywhere. The next one is calcite. So for calcite, what would be close enough? There's a few different ones you could think of. One might be a call site, like a call center. That's the one that I thought of when I was remembering it. I imagine this gypsy is answering a bunch of phones at a call center. And for myself, that wasn't a strong enough picture, so I imagined it at a construction site. To me, a construction site says site, so a call site. So these calls that this gypsy is taking are at a construction site. So that's how I remember the call site. Now, calcite, we want to link to fluorite. To me, when I think of fluoride, like at the dentist, those little things that go in your mouth, which were not so much fun as a kid. So I think of this construction site being filled with giant, exaggerated, out of proportion, fluoride little things. And then after fluorite is apatite. There's actually, if you know mineralogy, it can also be opalite, I believe. But for the purposes of this one, we're going to go with apatite, which is on Friedrich Moe's scale. So to link apatite to fluorite, all I need to think of is somebody voraciously eating all of these fluoride containers, which is a very absurd image. And then the next one is feldspar. Now, for me, I think of the movie Stardust. There's a scene where the star falls in that movie, and it's a strong enough image for me. But you could think of a feldspar, like people sparring and they fell down, but obviously make sure that it's a strong enough image, and you got to link that to the apatite. So maybe somebody's eating up all these people that have fallen while they're sparred. Whatever image you want to come up with in your mind, do that and really focus on that image. Then the next one is quartz. Say for instance, this person with a great appetite might be flipping coins, flipping quarters and eating them. That is pretty absurd. And then from quartz, you want to go to topaz. For me, I can imagine a giant topaz. You might imagine taupe-colored hats. You might imagine top hats. Actually, top hats works really well. So say, for instance, the person flipping quarters, all of a sudden it turns into a flood of quarters that are all landing in this giant top hat. And then after topaz is corundum. I can think of an apple core, somebody running with it, and is very dumb to me. Somebody's dumb, has got this spinning whistles around his head and just going like this, meandering all over the place with a giant apple core in his hand. Corundum, however you want to picture it, link that to topaz or top hat. And then corundum, we finally link to diamond. And diamonds we can all picture. Just imagine a massively exaggerated, out of proportion one, and this running dummy with the core in his hand bashes into a diamond. And there we have a way that we've substituted words to remember these really abstract words that you wouldn't ordinarily have an easy time remembering by rote. And so if I asked you what was after talc, of course you would think gypsum. After gypsum, you would think calcite. After calcite, you would think fluorite. After fluorite, you'd think of apatite. After apatite, you would think of feldspar. After feldspar, you'd think of quartz. After quartz, you would think of topaz. After topaz, you would think of corundum. After corundum, you would think of diamond. And you could do the same thing backwards. And so this is a really exciting way that we can actually learn vocabulary this way. Any vocabulary word can be broken up into similar words that you know. And as long as you can tie it in some way to something that even sounds similar enough, then you're going to remember what that word is. Again, your brain will do a lot of the work for you. You just need to get it close enough. And even the fact that you're trying to come up with a word already is forcing your brain to focus on it, to pay attention to it, to create that original awareness. I'm going to get into many more exciting ways to use this in future videos, but this is the substitution power tool. And you want to make sure to have that at your disposal, especially students. This is really great stuff when you need to memorize information, when you're studying for tests. And the cool thing is, as you learn how to do this, you can actually get to the point where you can hear something once the first time and already remember it. As in, students, when you're in your classroom, you can actually get to the point where even as you hear your professor give the information or write it down on the blackboard or on the digital screen, you're already memorizing it even before they erase it from that screen. So long before you've done the homework, you've already memorized the information. This is really powerful. Then when, instead of doing homework, instead of studying, all you're doing is mentally reviewing the stuff that you've already memorized. You can imagine that you can raise your grades substantially and cut way down on your study time. And there's a lot of other very powerful ways that you can use this too, which I'll get into in future videos. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Hope it hasn't been too bouncy as I've been walking to the subway, but bye-bye.